Good evening, everyone. This is Wayne over at the Alchemical Tech Revolution YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to do part 4 and the final part of our series called The Gods, as taught by the secret societies. And we're going to be looking once again into a book of the same name, The Gods, and there's a big long subtitle that goes with it. And this was written by Dr. Reuben Swinburne Clymer back in 1910. And just to give a little more background as to what we were discussing in the previous episodes here that were leading up to the conclusion here tonight of this series, Dr. Clymer wrote about who are these gods that he's referring to. Who were the gods? And he's equating them to different kinds of spiritual entities that you could call elementals, as he refers to them here, or demons of sorts. And that's what he references some older texts that speak about demonic type entities, and he makes some distinctions between what he would consider to be these demonic type entities, which he terms as being vampires, and equating them to the souls of corrupt human beings that have kind of stuck around in this place, and what he would term the elementals, or what he considers to be these true gods. Sorry about that, but just a little bit more about Dr. Clymer. He was also known as Pythagoras 38, and he was a member of many different orders. And here's just a short list of some of the titles he held. Supreme Grand Master, La Fédération Universelle des Ordres, Sociétés des Fraternités des Initiates, Supreme Grand Master of the Triple Order, Brotherhood, Temple, and Fraternity of the Rose Cross on the continents of North, South, and Central America, Grand Hierarch of High Priests, Order of the Magi, and Priests and Princes of Melchizedek of the Universe, etc., by order of Colonus V. So he got his titles and distinctions from various other members of these secret fraternities, and he was also a member of a council called the Imperial Euless Council, as well as what's referred to as the Eth priesthood, and that's Aeth. He was also a high-ranking member of the Imperialistic Council of the Magi. He was also head of the Temple of the Illuminati. Okay, so this guy had many degrees in many different secret fraternities, and what we're covering here tonight is the conclusion of this book that he had written called The Gods, and it's a big long subtitle that goes with it that we've kind of covered here in previous chapters here of this series that we're covering here. And last time we left off at point number 40 under the section of the book that he calls the Divine Mystery. So we're going to pick up right where we left off there. We'll just review what he was talking about. He was talking about how these different saints in the ancient stories, like Saint Anthony, had encountered these beings, these satyr-type beings and centaurs and things, and how these things could not possibly be demonic in any sense of the term. They couldn't be demon spirits because he would have recognized them as such, but he didn't recognize them as such, and he recognized them as animals. So he uses this kind of a correlation to equate to these elemental beings that he's talking about, and equating these different things to elemental beings. And here's the thing. Many of these stories of antiquity, this story of Saint Anthony, is probably just an allegorical tale, but he's taking it at face value and expressing it as being literal, and saying that, these things actually really happened in the literal sense. So that's kind of what he's alluding to here, and this is the premise that he just pushes his argument on. But anyway, we left off at number 40, where he claims that this being that St. Anthony had come across, and these various other ones that he cites throughout this work, these different church fathers and philosophers and things, these beings that they encounter, he says that they profess them to be of animal. To be an animal, not like a demonic spirit or something like that. So therefore, they would be like an intelligent animal or something along those lines. So he's equating that to being just like humans in a certain sense. But we'll get right into the reading here. Excuse me. Number 41, and we're under the section of the book titled The Divine Mystery. Number 41. We must observe that he said he knew that the common God had suffered in human flesh. Those words show him to have been a rational animal, for brutes know nothing but what is sensible and present, and can therefore have no knowledge of God. If that little man said that he and his fellows were aware of God having suffered in human flesh, it shows that by means of some revelation he had acquired the notion of God, as we have ourselves the revealed faith. That God assumed human flesh and suffered in it is the essence of the two principal articles of our faith: the existence of God, one, and threefold: his incarnation, passion, and resurrection. All that shows, as I said, that it was a rational animal capable of the knowledge of God through revelation, like ourselves, and endowed with a rational and consequently immortal soul. And I'm going to pause there. That's the end of point 41 there. And he's talking again about this being that was encountered by this Saint Anthony. And he's using the argument, okay, this being in their conversation recognized Jesus Christ as Lord, and in so doing, he shows himself to be a rational animal, because a demon would not confess that, or even if a demon would confess that, he would run off in terror at the servant of the Almighty God. So, this being his argument that this could not have been a demonic being or a demonic spirit or an evil spirit per se, but a rational animal. So this is just more reinforcing that point that he's trying to make here. And he's saying that these rational animals recognize these things that we recognize within the human family. Number 42. We must observe that, in the name of his whole flock, whose delegate he professed to be, he besought St. Anthony to pray for them to the common God, whereupon I infer that the little man was capable of beatitude and damnation, and that he was not in termino but in via. Here is the proof of one thing which I have always contended for. If these elementals could become immortal through their own efforts, it would not be necessary for them to appeal to human beings for such prayer. They would then go direct to the Godhead for their salvation or regeneration. This is not possible. Consequently, there is but one way. They must appeal to mankind, and man must help them to immortality. It is the only way for them. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. Once again, he's talking about this story about St. Anthony and this small woodland being that he allegedly encountered, and how this woodland being said to him, I'm here on behalf of my people. Could you pray for us that we could have immortal souls? Pray to your God. And he recognized St. Anthony's God. Okay? So what Dr. Clymer is trying to infer here is that these elemental beings can only achieve immortality through the advent of humans, through the intercession of humans to the divine. See, so once again, he's kind of trying to equate this godlike attribute to human beings to these special beings, these people within this grand brotherhood. You see, this is what their secret societies are all about. They hyperinflate their egos with this stuff. They want to become God. They think they can be godlike. And if they could save these elemental beings in this godlike way, bring them immortality, be able to bestow upon them an immortal soul in some way, this gives them godlike powers. See, and it's really kind of a shady thing when it comes down to it. But let's continue on with the reading here. Number 43. We must observe that the little man professed to be delegated by others of his kind when saying, I am on a mission from my flock, words from which many inferences may be deduced. One is that the little man was not alone of his kind, an exceptional and solitary monster, but that there were many of the same species, since congregating they made up a flock, and that he came in the name of all, which could not have been, had not the will of the many centered in him. Another is that those animals held by a social life, since one of them was sent in the name of the many, Another is that although living in the wilderness, it is not assigned to them as a permanent abode, for St. Anthony, having never previously been in that desert, which was far distant from his hermitage, they could not have known whom he was, nor what his degree of sanctity. It was therefore necessary that they should become acquainted with him elsewhere, and consequently that they should have traveled beyond that wilderness. So, going to pause there. Once again, in this point, he's arguing that, okay, this is, there must be more of these. This was not a solitary being, as he claimed to be, representing these other beings. So, therefore, this is not just like a one-time thing. So I guess what he's trying to equate there is, if there's a community of them, it can't be a demon, can it? And that's kind of the idea I think he's trying to get to there. But let's get on with the reading. Number 44. We must observe that the little man said he was one of those whom the Gentiles, blinded by error, called fauns, satyrs, and incubi. And by these words is shown the truth of our principal position, that incubi are rational animals capable of beatitude and damnation. And I'm going to pause right there. Do you hear what he said there? And by these words is shown the truth of our principal position, this is Dr. Clymer's position, that incubi, or demons as we would call them, are rational animals capable of beatitude and damnation. So he's saying that these demons are capable of being damned or being saved, see? And who's going to save them? Well, didn't we discuss earlier what Dr. Clymer thinks, the salvation for these quote-unquote elemental beings is? They would have to marry and have intercourse with a human being. Do you see where this is going? And we're going to explore these ideas a little further down the pike here, because it gets a little bit disturbing at some level that many of these people that are high up in these secret societies actually act upon these beliefs. So, and we could see where it leads. But anyway, enough with that. Let's continue on with the reading. Number 45. The apparition of such little men is of frequent occurrence in metallic mines, as is written by Gregorius Agricola in his book, De Animal Subterrane. They appear to the miners clothed like themselves, play and caper together, laugh and titter, and throw stones at them for the sake of amusement. A sign, says the above-named author, of excellent success, and of finding of some branch or body of a mineral tree. This is true, but only one kind of elementals can ever be found in the mines. These are the gnomes, or elementals of the earth. I'm going to pause right there. That's what he's been alluding to here as these beings in the woods, the satyrs and such. He equates them to being these gnomes, or these elementals of the earth. Okay, so let's go on with the reading, because we've got quite a bit here to cover tonight, and I would like to actually make this the conclusion of this study tonight, and then we'll move on to the next phase here. So let's continue on. Number 46. The only question which remains to be answered is this: whence do those little men, or incubi, dwell? Gonna pause there. You see what he's doing there? He's equating incubi to gnomes, these elemental beings of the earth. See? He's referring to them as incubi now. Kind of, giving the connotation of something demonic, but at the same time denying that it's demonic. Okay? When you're using these terms like incubi in such a way, or incubus and succubus, and you're using these terms in such a way as to just equate it, no, that's just a nature spirit, it's just an elemental spirit, they don't mean any harm. It's not the same thing as what you're thinking. You see, those foolish church fathers back then, and those foolish philosophers, they were all wrong about these things. See, that's kind of what he's inferring there. But anyway, back to the reading. So he asks the question, whence do those little men, or incubi, dwell? To that I reply, and he's going to answer his own question here again, folks, and this is back to Dr. Clymer's words now. Some are earthly, some aqueous, some aerial, some igneous, That is to say that their bodies are made of the most subtle parts of the elements. Their dwellings will consequently be found in that element which corresponds to their bodies. Igneous incubi, for instance, will only stay forcibly, maybe will not stay at all, in water or marshes, which are adverse to them, thus with the others also. We see the like happen to men, who, accustomed to thicker air, cannot reach certain lofty ridges of the Alps, where the air is too subtle for their lungs. And I'm going to pause there, folks. You see what he's trying to do here. He's making this kind of allusion to, you see, people who live down at sea level, if they go high up in the Alps, they just can't function up there. It's the same thing with these elementals. They function in their own element. Okay, so let's get back to his points here. Number 47. St. Austin, then, in his Commentary on Genesis, book 2, chapter 17, writes as follows concerning demons. They have the knowledge of some truths, partly through the more subtle acumen of their senses, partly through the greater subtlety of their bodies. And book 3, chapter 1, demons are aerial animals because they partake of the nature of aerial bodies. In his epistle 115 to Hebrideus, he affirms that they are aerial or ethereal animals endowed with very sharp senses. In The City of God, Book 11, Chapter 13, he says that the worst demon has an aerial body. Book 21, Chapter 10, he writes, the bodies of certain demons, as has been believed by some learned men, are even made of thick and damp air which we breathe. Book 15, Chapter 23, he dares not define whether angels with an aerial body could feel the lust which would incite them to communicate with women. Psalm 14. He observes that the body of angels is inferior to the soul, and in his book De Divinat Demonium, he everywhere, and especially chapter 23, teaches that demons have subtle bodies. Regarding the food of the elementals or incubi, let us see to this also. Going to pause there. That's the end of point number 47. You see how he interchanges the idea of elementals and demons here? And he's using these works of others, like St. Austin in his commentary on Genesis and the book The City of God. Now he's talking about these demons have an aerial or ethereal type body, that they don't have a true physical manifestation at all times. It's more of an aerial type thing. They're much more subtle bodied than us, although they can manifest in physical form, in like a true physical form, and have physical effects here in our reality, but it's not quite the same as how we exist in the material here. So that's kind of what he's alluding to there. But let's get back to the reading, because it's going to get more interesting from here. Number 48. I deduce that, being animals, consequently reproducible through generation and liable to corruption, they require food for the restoration of their corporal substance wasted by effluvia. For the life of every sensible being consists in nothing else but the motion of the corporal elements, which flow and ebb, are acquired, lost, and recruited by means of substances spirituous, yet material, assimilated by the living things, either through inhalation of air or by the fermentation of food, which spiritualizes its substance. I'm going to pause there. He's talking about, what do these things eat? Okay? What do they breathe? How do they function? You see, he is equating life to these things. They have a type of life or life essence that's similar to ours in some ways, is what he's suggesting here. Let's get back to the reading and see what else Dr. Clymer has to say. Number 49. But their bodies, being subtle, equally subtle and delicate, must be its food. And just as perfumes and other vaporous and volatile substances, when adverse to their nature, offend and put them to flight, In the like manner, when agreeable, they delight in and feed upon them. Now, as it is written by Cornelius, manna is nothing but an emanation of water and earth, refined and baked by the heat of the sun, and then coagulated and condensed by the cold of the following night. Of course, I am speaking of the manna sent down from heaven for the nourishment of the Hebrews, and which differs, all in all, from nostrate or medicinal manna. The latter, in fact, according to Ettmuller, is merely the juice of transudation of certain trees which, during the night, get mixed up with dew, and the next morning coagulates and thickens in the heat of the sun. The manna of the Hebrews, on the contrary, derived from other principles, far from coagulating, liquefied in the heat of the sun, as is shown in the Scripture. The manna of the Hebrews was, therefore, undoubtedly of the most subtle substance, consisting as it did of emanations of earth and water, and being dissolved by the sun and made to disappear. Consequently, it may well have been the food of the animals we are speaking of, and thus have been truly called by David the bread of angels. Going to pause right there. That's the end of point 49. He's talking about manna. If you remember the story of the Hebrews in the wilderness, wandering in the wilderness, they were fed every morning. Manna would appear on the ground, and this was a type of a white substance that appeared on the ground that the Hebrews would eat. And it was, attributed to the hand of God, reaching down and giving them food because they had no food. So this was their source of food, was the manna. But he's also saying that this manna is of subtle essence, and this is what these elementals feed upon, okay? And it's not always visible, and it doesn't always manifest physically, okay? That it's a combination. You see how he imparts the ideas of these four elements once again into this idea? How he says that it's an emanation of water and earth, refined and baked by the heat of the sun. So you have earth and water, and then the heat of the sun's fire, and then coagulated and condensed by the cold of the following night. And that's the air idea. See, it's all tied together right there. So that's what he's saying here as far as that goes. And then he makes a distinction from what he calls medicinal manna, which he says is merely it would kind of be something like sap from the trees, from what I get from this reading here. The juice of the transudation of certain trees, which during the night gets mixed up with the dew, and then the next morning it coagulates and thickens. So this would be like a tree sap type thing. So he's talking about medicinal remedies here that he's referring to as manna as well, but he makes the distinction. This is not the same thing that we're talking about. So he's calling this the bread of angels. So this manna from heaven, or bread of angels, he's claiming these subtle substances. This is the food of the elementals. And this is also why things like incense are so important in a lot of these rituals and practices, these magical practices and stuff that these secret societies put into use. See, because the different scents and essences attract these spirits, allegedly. Or that's what they believe anyhow. But let's get back to the reading. Sorry, got to clear my throat there. Number 50. We have another authority in the gospel, according to St. John chapter 10, verse 16, where it says, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and they shall have one fold and one shepherd. If we inquire what are these sheep which are of that fold, and what the fold of which the Lord Christ speaketh, we are answered by all commentators that the only fold of Christ is the church, to which the preaching of the gospel was to bring the Gentiles, sheep of another fold than that of the Hebrews. They are, in fact, of opinion that the fold of Christ was the synagogue, because David had said, Psalm 95, verse 7, "We are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand," and also because Abraham and David had been promised that the Messiah should be born of their race, because he was expected by the Hebrew people, foretold by the prophets, who were Hebrews, and his advent, his acts, his passion, death, and resurrection were prefigured in the sacrifice, worship, and ceremonials of the Hebrew law. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. Do you see what he's doing here? He's trying to say that this traditional viewpoint, that when it says in the Bible that his fold will be of another flock, this has always been considered to be the Gentiles. See, this would be because the Jewish people, Christ was of the Jewish nationality per se, for lack of better terms, because he was born into the whole religious structure and the society of that place. He was a Jew, okay? And then he actually spread the gospel for the Gentiles too. And many of the Hebrews could not accept this idea, and that's why still today there's this division. See, we have your Jewish people today and your Hebrews and the different ideas that go on today with the different religious aspects of these things. But this is kind of where the separation and divide is, because they thought that their Savior was only going to be for their people, so to say, their select group of people, their select race, okay? But Jesus reached out to the Gentiles too, and it brought them into the fold, and that's what this usually refers to in this sense. This is what most of the theologians and the scholars and stuff agree was the meaning of that verse, but Dr. Clymer has something different in mind for it, and we could see how he's lining that up here, okay? So let's get back to the reading so we can get back to what he's trying to say with it here, and we'll see. Number 51. Excuse me. But saving always the reverence due to the Holy Fathers and other doctors, that explanation does not seem quite satisfactory. For it is an article of belief that the Church of the Faithful has been the only one in existence from the beginning of the world, and will thus endure to the end of time. The head of that Church is Jesus Christ, the mediator between God and men, by whose contemplation all things were made and created. Indeed, the faith in the divine Trinity, though less explicitly, and the incarnation of the Word were revealed to the first man, and by him taught his children, who, in their turn, taught them their descendants. And thus, although most men have strayed into idolatry and deserted the true faith, many kept the faith they have received from their fathers, and observing the law of nature, stayed in the true church of the faithful, as is noticed by Cardinal Tollet in reference to Job, who was a saint among idolatrous Gentiles, and although God had conferred special favors upon the Hebrew people, prescribed for them peculiar laws and ceremonials, and separated them from the Gentiles, yet those laws were not obligatory on the Gentiles, and the faithful Hebrews did not constitute a church different from that of the Gentiles, who professed their faith in one God and the coming of the Messiah. Let's continue on with what he says here in point 52. All in all, it becomes clear that the Gentiles also belonged, like the Jew, to the fold of Christ, that is, to the same church of the faithful. It cannot, therefore, be correctly said that the words of Christ, "Other sheep I have, which are not of this fold," are applicable to the Gentiles who had, in common with the Hebrews, the faith in God, the hope, prophecy, expectation, prodigies, and preaching of the Messiah. Number 53. I therefore say that by the words "other sheep" may very well be understood those rational creatures or animals of whom we have been treating hitherto. Gonna pause right there, folks. There it is. Okay. So now he's claiming that Jesus wasn't talking about the Gentiles there. Okay. And bringing them into the fold with the Jews. No. See, Dr. Clymer and, many of his contemporaries think that he was talking about elementals or these demon beings, okay? These incubi spirits, these kind of things that he's been talking about through this entire book here, okay? This is what they believe in the secret societies. This is what they teach. Now, whether they truly believe that there's actually like these things really exist in reality, or if it's allegorical or not, is open for debate. But this is what they're teaching, and this is what they teach to some of their up-and-coming members through these different ranks in these societies, these lower-level ones, not at the top. But let's continue on back to the reading, back to Dr. Clymer's words. They being, as we have said, capable of beatitude, and Jesus Christ being their moderator between God and man, as also, let me start that again. Excuse me. They being, as we have said, capable of beatitude, and Jesus Christ being the moderator between God and man, as also every rational creature, for rational creatures attain to beatitude in consideration of the merits of Christ through the grace he conferred upon them, without which beatitude is impossible of attainment. Every rational creature must have cherished, at the same time as the faith in God, the hope of the advent of Christ, and have had the revelation of his nativity in the flesh, and of the principles of the law of grace. Those were, therefore, the sheep which were not of human fold. And those are Dr. Clymer's words, and it's in quote, not of human fold, and which Christ had to bring. The sheep which were to hear his voice, that is, the announcement of his advent, and of the evangelical doctrine, either directly through him or through the apostles. The sheep which, partaking with men of heavenly beatitude, were to realize one fold and one shepherd. Going to continue on with Dr. Clymer's words here in point number 54. Number 54. To this interpretation, which I hold to be in no way improper, force is added by what we related, according to St. Hieronymus, of that little man who requested St. Anthony to pray for him and his fellows unto the common God, whom he knew to have suffered in human flesh. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. You see once again how he grabs back at the straws of this story that he told previously. Okay? He's using this to hold up his whole argument, this story. Okay? And, whether it really holds up under the weight of scrutiny or not, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it really would stand up to the weight of scrutiny. But this is what he keeps alluding back to for his evidence that, these beings are not demons per se, but elementals, and that they just want their immortality and salvation too, and they could only achieve that through the intervention of man. So, anyway, that's what he's implying here for. So, let's get back to the reading, back to Dr. Clymer's words. For it implies that they were aware of the advent and of the death of Christ, whom as God they were anxious to propitiate, since sought, to that effect, the intercession of St. Anthony. What we have hitherto deduced accordingly solves the question as to how a woman can be got with child by an incubus, and it says in parentheses, elemental. In fact, it cannot be brought about by the vita assumed from man, agreeably to the common opinion which we confuted. It follows, therefore, that she is directly impregnated by the vita of the incubus, which, being an animal and capable of giving life, has the vita of his own, and thus is fully explained the begetting of giants from the intercourse of the sons of God with the daughters of men. For that intercourse gave birth to giants who, although like unto men, were of higher stature, and though begotten of demons, and consequently of great strength, yet equaled them neither in might nor power. Gonna pause right there, folks. So you see, he's saying that this whole Genesis chapter 6 thing that we've talked about previously, and we've touched upon here previously, where the sons of God came down unto the daughters of men, and they beget giants, right? Children. These were renowned men of old. See, that whole idea. Many of the theologians and some scholars believe that these beings would equate to the fallen angels or the watchers spoken about in the book of Enoch. But Dr. Clymer is suggesting that these were elementals, okay? And that, it's not something that's real common, but it does happen where they could have intercourse with a human being and thus achieve immortality that way and beget offspring that way. So, let's get back to Dr. Clymer's words and see where exactly he's going with this. Number 55. In confirmation of the above inference, we observe that animals sprung from the mixing of different kinds do not breed, but are barren, as seen in certain kinds. Now, we do not read of giants having been begotten of other giants, but of their having been born of the sons of God, that is, elemental, and the daughters of men, being thus begotten of the vita of the elemental mixed with the human vita, and being, as it were, an intermediate species between them and man. They had no generative power. Gonna pause right there, folks. See, it being a hybrid being has no generative power, and this is very important, okay, when we look at things coming down the pike here in our world right now, okay? So let's keep that in the back of our minds, okay? And we'll continue with the reading here. Number 56. It will be retorted that if the generation of giants had really come from the combined vita of incubi and women, giants would still be born in our time, since there is no lack of women who have intercourse with incubi, as shown by the acts of St. Bernard and Peter of Alcantara. I'm going to pause right there. I'm not sure who exactly he's talking about there, but he's claiming that there's no lack of women who have intercourse with incubi in this day and age. So why aren't they getting these giants? Let's get back to what he has to say here. Point number 57. Now, it must be observed that after the flood, the air which surrounds our earthly and aqueous globe became, from the damp of the waters, thicker than it had been heretofore. And damp being the principle of corruption, that may be the reason why men do not live as they did before the flood. Going to pause right there. So he's saying, folks, here is that the waters, remember, after the flood, the waters became thicker. Okay, this is kind of like that whole elemental, that subtle idea he's talking about before. It's not as subtle as it was before, that subtlety. Okay, so now it's thicker, and since moisture or water is the power of corruption, that decreased the lifespan of man, and that's what he's alluding to here. Okay, so that's what he's saying. The principle of corruption, that may be the reason why men do not live as they did before the flood. They don't live the same way, and they don't live as long. See, that's what he's claiming here. But let's get back to the reading, back to Dr. Clymer's words again. It is also on account of that thickness of the air that ethereal and igneous demons, more corpulent than the others, can no longer dwell in the thick atmosphere, and if they do descend into it occasionally, do so only by force, much as divers descend into the depths of the sea. Gonna pause right there. That's the end of point 57. So he's saying it's because of this change now since the flood in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is different. Like all of the elements they're thicker than they were before. So these being subtle beings, they can't really exist there. See how he's equating it to a kind of type of what would we say, a density per se? Probably something more akin to a vibration, or something along those lines, a frequency, a vibration. So they're not attuned to here. So in order for them to come here, it would be kind of like if we were to go deep sea diving, we would have to force ourselves to the bottom, and we wouldn't be necessarily real comfortable there. See, and that's not our natural state. So that's what he's alluding to here. But let's get back to his reading and see where exactly he's going with all of this. Number 58. Before the flood, when the air was not yet so thick, demons came upon the earth and had intercourse with women, thus procreating giants whose stature was nearly equal to that of the demons, their fathers. But now it is not so. The incubi who approach women are equeous and of small stature. That is why they appear in the shape of little men, and being aqueous, they are more lecherous. Poets have depicted Venus as born of the sea, in order to show, as explained by mythologists, that lust takes its source from damp. When, therefore, demons of short stature impregnate women nowadays, the children that are born are not giants, but men of ordinary size. It should, however, be known that when demons have intercourse with women in their own natural body, without having resource to any disguise or artifice, the women do not see them, or, if they do, see but an almost doubtful, barely invisible shadow. But when they want to be seen, they assume a visible disguise and a palpable body. By what means this is effected is their secret, which our short-sighted philosophy is unable to discover. The only thing we know is that such disguise of body could not consist merely in concrete air, since this must take place through condensation, and therefore by the influence of cold. A body thus formed would feel cold like ice. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. And it's one of those things that many ghost hunters and stuff realize. If there's a spirit in the house, especially a demonic spirit, there's cold spots. See, and that's something they look for. Just kind of as an aside there. But let's get back to the reading here and see what Dr. Clymer says. Back to his words now. There is error in this because it is not true that only the elementals that are aqueous can have intercourse with earth people. The one reason why the salamanders or elementals of fire, which were really the giants or sons of God, do not appear more often is because they are but few, and these few come only when some leader of the people is required. It is not the air or dampness which prevents them from reaching the earth plane, but the fact that there are few vessels properly fitted for the great work. All those who have truly learned the Eth mystery, and it's spelled Aeth, can know these salamanders, although not all can come into direct touch with them. The world does not need giants, and thus no giants would be born, for the law of Hermes is, as above, so below. The demand for giants is no longer, and therefore such would not be born unless we understand it as mental, moral, or spiritual giants. The means the elementals use in order to become visible is now known as materialization. However, even this they need not employ, since those who want to see them and do see them are usually such as are spiritually developed, or as the author would have it, such as have the perception of intuition. And that's the end of point number 58, and I'm going to pause right there, folks. Do you hear exactly what he's saying here? These fire elementals, see, he's equating, a higher kind of elevation of these fire elementals, these salamanders, right? He's fitting them in a position to be superior to the other elementals in the way he's talking about them. And he's saying that they only come here when the people need leaders, okay? And I think we had directly pointed out earlier in the work that he claims that Jesus was the son of a fire elemental and a human. See? So do you see what he's doing here? How he's twisting things and claiming that these beings, these fire elementals, these are what we would refer to as the sons of God that were talked about in the Bible, and that they came down and mated with the daughters of men. See? But there's no longer, he says there's no longer need for giants, and there's no reason to have giants unless we're talking about mental, moral, or spiritual giants. You see what he's doing here? Anyway, this is, a lot of it's very convoluted ideas here, caught up in this. But this is his claim, and this is what they teach and what they believe, and they actually have what they deem to be the highest possible initiation rite, okay? The highest form of priesthood. They call the Eth priesthood, okay? The Eth mystery that he referred to here. That this is what, they truly learned about these salamanders, and that these salamanders or fire elementals are key to many of these mysteries, okay? And this is important stuff at the very topmost levels of these initiatory groups, okay? Yeah, so let's get back to the reading as to what Dr. Clymer has to say here. Number 59. As for intercourse with an incubus, wherein is to be found no element, not even the least, of an offense against religion, it is hard to discover a reason why it should be more grievous than any other. Bestiality is a sin because it degrades man, both body and soul. But when with But when with incubus, it is quite the reverse. For the incubus, by reason of his rational and immortal spirit, is equal to man, and by reason of his body more noble, because more subtle, he is more perfect and more dignified than man. I'm going to pause right there, folks. Do you hear him calling good bad and bad good? Do you see the inversion? See, he's saying here, that what harm is it having sex with a demon? Do you hear this? They're actually more perfect than you. They're better than you. Do you hear that? It won't defile you or degrade you because it's a step up. That's what he's saying. Okay? Anyway, I don't know how much more direct I could be about this. Do you see the perversion they're teaching at the topmost levels of these secret societies? Do you see what they believe? Okay, they believe sex with demons is good. You know what I'm saying? And having relations with these entities is good. And then we wonder why the world's in the shape it's in. But anyway, let's get back to the reading. Okay, back to Dr. Clymer's words. Consequently, when having intercourse with an incubus, man does not degrade, but rather dignifies his nature. Beloved student, you may question why the writings of a Catholic are thus brought prominently to the fore. The reasons are many. Among these is the fact that many students of the mysterious consider that only the occultist and mystic, who is considered slightly weak anyhow by the people, has believed in these things. Herein it is shown, without danger of contradiction, that all the church fathers, even the councils, have believed in this very thing. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. No, he hasn't shown that. He's taking the things that they've written and said and twisting them out of context and adding different properties and titles to what they're saying. You see how he keeps using the convoluted game he's using here? How he'll replace the word demon with elemental when he feels like it, and then he'll add in the plausible deniability of the fact of, there's vampire spirits, and that's the evil ones that you're thinking of, and that kind of thing. Do you see what he does here? How he's perverted this whole idea and justified this idea in his own mind and in the minds of, these secret society groups? This is exactly what they do. It's inversion and perversion, and it's a twisting of truth in reality. So, anyway, let's get back to the reading here. Where did we leave off? Right here. I think I read this already, but we'll read it again. Herein it is shown without danger of contradiction that all the church fathers, even the councils, have believed in this very thing. Another reason is that it strengthens my contention that the Immaculate Conception is not only possible, but that it is an absolute fact. And I'm going to pause right there. Okay. So he's saying that the Immaculate Conception is an absolute fact. I'm not disagreeing with that. I believe that myself, that that's an absolute fact, that it happened. It's just how it happened or who the participants in it were that I disagree with him on here. Okay? And so you see how he takes a truth and a fact, as he puts it here, an absolute fact, and he twists it to prop up what his viewpoint is, his whole idea here, his agenda, this whole elemental idea concept that he's talking about. See? Anyway, back to the reading again. And these are back to Dr. Clymer's words here. Still another reason is that by quoting the church itself on these points, there is no danger of my challenge ever being accepted, for to do so would overthrow the very foundation of religion. The work has therefore served its purpose and served it well. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. Do you hear what he's saying there? He's saying, okay, he's going to use these arguments, see, and he puffs himself up here. This is his ego talking, okay? He says, still another reason for quoting the church itself on these points is that there's no danger of them ever challenging me on it, because if they do, then they're saying that they're wrong on stuff, and therefore the whole thing's a sham. The whole religion and stuff is a sham. See, even though he hasn't really proved what he claims that he proved by using these arguments. See, that's the problem. And he says here, right at the end there, the work has therefore served its purpose and served it well. So what's his purpose? To undermine the church. or to undermine the religious ideals, the morals. See? What has this done? This work, therefore, served its purpose. Well, what was its purpose that it served so well? Oh, to undermine the authority of religions or spiritual ideas or morality. See? Do you see the game that he's playing here? It's not about what's true and what's correct. See, this says it all right here. This is his statement. This is Dr. Clymer's words. In what he's done here is by trying to use these arguments and taking the words of these various church fathers and different councils and things and twisting them out of context and presenting them in this way. He's saying that he issued this challenge now that these things actually prove his point, and that if they disagree with this, then they're disagreeing with their own words. So therefore, it discredits them, their authority on this matter. See. So he's saying the game is won. That's pretty much what he's saying. He's admitting that he's playing these types of games. So he says the work has therefore served its purpose and served it well. So that his whole point in using, these different sources from different church fathers and things is so that he could try his best to discredit the church or discredit anything spiritual and good and moral. Okay? By saying, well, you're wrong because you disagreed with me. I proved this outright in my writing here. So he hasn't proved a thing. Okay, let's just be honest about it. His making allusions to these references in regards to his agenda here and the way he twists it to fit into the viewpoint he wants to present with this does not prove anything. Okay, so... But in his view, he sees it as being absolute. See, if they disagree with me, well, I could point out this and this and this and show them how they're mistaken. See? So that's his whole end game there. That's what he wants, to push across with anybody who comes back at this stuff with the kind of religious view that, hey, demons are bad. See? That's exactly what he's trying to fend off here. Hey, demons are bad. Then he'll say, you don't know what you believe. This is what your religion teaches. These are not bad. And if you disagree with me, you're wrong. See? Anyway, back to the reading here. Back to Dr. Clymer's words once again. And we're almost finished, so hang in there. The student will bear in mind that all the paragraphs numbered appear in the original book known as Demoniality, or Incubi and Succubi, by the Reverend Father Sinistrari of Amino, 17th century. Although many had to be changed on account of the plain language used. Gonna pause right there. Let me translate that for you. Though many had to be changed to suit my agenda. That's what he's saying there, okay? Back to his words now. All other parts are original and for which the present publisher is responsible. A number of entirely new laws are given, and I challenge the entire world for a successful contradiction of them. Furthermore, it would seem that the desire of the elementals is to come into contact with mankind for the purpose of intercourse and immortality through that. I'm going to pause right there, folks. It would seem that the desire of the elementals is to come into contact with mankind for the purpose of intercourse. Oh, and immortality through that. I can't, man, with this guy. I'll tell you. Let's get back to his words again. This is back to his words. Let me tell you frankly that such is not the case. All that these elementals desire is to come into contact with true humanity and be loved by such, for they can become immortal through this love just as well as through the intercourse, if not more easily so, since intercourse may lead to degradation. All that these beautiful beings desire is the love of those with whom they come into contact. They actually do not seek any other intercourse, but, like all women of the earth plane, they would not refuse the one whom they thus love. And I'm going to pause right there, folks, okay? So what he's saying is they want an intimacy, see, this special intimacy that's something more than just intercourse. You see, they want to have this type of a lover-type relationship with a human being. Now, does that strike you as creepy, that like a demonic entity, or what we might call a demonic entity, and he's calling them elementals here. He's saying they're not bad, they just want immortality, and they just want to be loved, okay? That they come here just to seek that. But anyway, that's kind of what he's inferring here, that they want something more. They want an attachment. And he had referred earlier in the book about how jealous these spirits are, and that they might actually harm their lover or whatever for an indiscretion. That sounds like a demon to me, folks. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But this is what he's pushing here, okay? This is the viewpoint he's pushing. So let's get back to his words, and we're almost right to the end here. So let's go ahead here with the conclusion, back to Dr. Clymer's words. It may be questioned whether, to my personal and absolute knowledge, these things are facts. I answer they are absolutely true in every respect. I know of those who, being initiates of the Eth Brotherhood, have been able to save hundreds of these beautiful elementals. On the other hand, I know of many who have been the victims of disembodied vampires. I have had both men and women to come to me from nearly every part of our country and plead with me to help them get rid of these deadly vampires who were sapping their very life by sapping them of their vitality. In every case, I have been successful. Thus do I know that these things are absolute facts, and through the following of these laws for many years, without fail in any case, I know that they are absolute. The student will excuse me for making these personal remarks, but they are required in order to show that the things set forth are true. Finish. And that's the end, folks. That's the end of the book. So you see how Dr. Clymer concluded this book. He personally knew people who saved hundreds of these elementals. So he's known people within these secret groups who have had intercourse with hundreds of demons. Okay? And he even admits here there's been some that have become victims of these disembodied vampires. See? Do you see the double talk and how blind he is to this idea? These very beings that he just described, and he kept interchanging the words incubus, succubus, elemental, demon, interchanging all these words, describing these very same beings, and he comes up with this distinction. Oh, there's these vampiric beings. These aren't the elementals, but he also says here that he's encountered within the various brotherhoods and stuff that he belonged to, people who had these types of problems, these negative connotations with these things, okay? And in the same breath, he also is holding up that, this idea of having intercourse and relationships with these elementals is a good thing, because you see, you can bring them salvation, you can offer them immortality. But I have to question, first of all, how exactly does this happen? And second of all, what happens to the human being in this process? And I would say, just by the fact that he speaks about the disembodied vampires here right at the end as kind of a side note, or kind of an afterthought to this whole thing of how he knows many initiates within the Eth Brotherhood, and that's AETH Brotherhood, who have been able to save hundreds of these elementals. And then he just passingly mentions that, oh yeah, and there's been lots of people that had all kinds of bad things happen, bad, demonic things happen to them too. But, that's neither here nor there. But that proves that this is absolutely true. Do you see the tact that he's taken here? And that he himself, because of he has followed these laws and this stuff and been very successful. He's never failed because he's followed these laws and stuff faillessly. And he knows for a fact that this is the truth. So he doesn't even see his own deception here, okay? He doesn't see how he has been deceived himself. He can't see it. He's blind to it. And yet, these are the ideas he pushes. And we're going to explore more of these different ideas as to what exactly goes on within some of these secret society groups, what it is they believe, what it is they pursue, and why. And I think that this series that we just did gives people, it could give you a really good indication as to some of the reasons why they do the things they do, or why they pursue the different things that they do pursue. Okay, because they wholeheartedly believe that they could become, great saviors and become renowned like the men of old. See, by saving these beings, these poor lost beings that would not potentially have any immortality if it were not for them to be able to save them. See, through these different means, and once again, it calls upon the ideas of the sex force, okay? The actual, this would be your generative force. This is the things that the Masons talk about too. The generative force, it always ties back to that. And the generative force is always tied to reproduction, okay? This is what it's all about. They equate this generative force with the sex force, okay? And this is exactly what they teach, what they're all about. This is why it's a solar phallic cult when it all comes down to it. This is why they build these giant, monuments and stuff everywhere, these giant obelisks, okay? It's a giant penis, okay? This is what they revere. This is what they revere, the sex force, the generative force. This is also the key to what they would term magic, okay? The generative force. That's why sexual debauchery and all this stuff that we see going on in the world today, all these perversions with these different groups and stuff at the top of them, whether, they could directly tie these groups to them or not. And, I would say that many of these occult groups would have something to do with many of these things that go on, the human trafficking and things of that nature, because of this idea. See, and it always ties back to this same thing. And we're going to go ahead and look at some of their other writings that will show you that this is the case. I'm not just saying this. I've put many, many hours of research into this. They believe they could achieve magical powers with this generative force by using the sex force as the primary factor which motivates their will. You see, that's the difference when they're talking about will. They're not just talking about, the regular, we would think about willpower. When they're talking about directing their will, they're talking about directing their sexual energy towards a means or an end, okay? And using that. That's what they're referring to when they're saying, do as thou will. When Crowley says, do as thou will. There's more to it than that. There's that underlying current. They're talking about the sex force. And this is the key to any magical ritual or anything of the sort. That's why you have these disgusting musicians and stuff prancing around on stage, doing these perverted satanic rituals on stage. And they're always, this whole, sexual thing as an underlying thing with it. That's why. This is why. This is the real deal, guys. This is what goes on in these topmost levels of these secret societies. This is what they teach. This is what they believe. This is how they want to attain their magical power and their, godhood, per se. This is their great work, okay? This is what they're talking about. And that's not what the original alchemists and some of the philosophers of old intended with the great work. Okay, it's a total perversion of what used to be a good thing. And they've taken this whole idea and concept and inverted it completely and twisted it into something that's not good. And these are the people running the world. Okay? Make no bones about that. The people that are actually running things in this world are at these highest, most levels of the occult in these different secret brotherhoods and stuff. Okay, they're the ones calling the shots. You don't see them publicly. Okay, any of the public faces that are out there that we could see, like your Bill Gates, the world, and your Rothschilds and all that, those are just people put there to be scapegoats. And it's another kind of a magical occult concept, the scapegoat. Okay, Same thing. You don't see the real power players in the public view. But I assure you, these are the ones calling the shots at the topmost levels. And these are the things that they believe and act upon, is these things that we're touching upon in these different series. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me tonight, and we'll pick up next time when we look at another one of these type of works that talk about some of these different ideas and concepts. And maybe we could give you a little better insight as to why the people that are in power do these, what we would consider terrible things to us. Why they manipulate us the way they do, and why they use these different kinds of ideas and concepts the way that they do upon us. Anyway, have a good night, folks. We'll catch you next time.